Hello, and welcome to LakeView Listens, LakeView Lutheran Church's monthly podcast. Each month, we're here to delve into some experiences, ideas with some of the many people who are connected in some way with Lakeview and who are also deeply involved in their communities in really meaningful ways. I'm your host, Zachariah Schmidt, on staff at LVLC. Today, I'm here for episode 6 of Lakeview Listens with Emily Jewell. Emily, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So great to have you here. Emily has been a friend and member of Lakeview for quite some time. How long have you been associated with Lakeview now?
It was the fall of 2006.
Okay, so quite some time. And you guys, you're in New York City right now with your husband and your daughter. How long have you guys been out there?
We have been in New York City for a decade now. We hit 10 years in October.
Oh my God. Wow. I didn't
Mhm.
realize it was that long. 10 years.
I
Okay.
know. I'm surprised myself.
Yeah, that's wild. So music has always been a really important part of the ministry at Lakeview, and you have, I mean, not just in a musical way, but you've really provided a lot in terms of musical life during your time at Lakeview, and you were part of the anniversary concert for Lakeview's 175th anniversary last February. That's crazy too. Almost a year now that we did
I
that
know.
concert. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
but it
wild.
was such yeah, but it was such a joy to be able to hear you last year and to play with you. And do a little bit of a shameless pitch. If you're listening, the video of that anniversary concert is on our YouTube channel, same channel that you can find the podcast. You can head over there and see all of our anniversary events from last year, including the concert where you can listen to Emily and myself perform. So, anyways, just wanted to say hey to you. And if you want to just give us a little bit of background about yourself. You grew up in Iowa, correct?
I did. I grew up in southeastern Iowa in Washington, just south of Iowa City. I went to college at Viterbo University in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and got my BFA in musical theater performance. And that's why I moved to Chicago in the fall of 2006
Mhm.
after I graduated. And I found Lakeview because I think I went to the ELCA website and just typed in Lutheran churches near me. And it was the first one that popped up. And I came that next Sunday and I met Lila,
Mm,
and the rest, as they say, is history.
yeah, great. How long I guess you're not really still a member at Lakeview per se, but how long were you at Lakeview? Were you there all the way up until you guys moved to New York?
Um, Technically, I believe we are still members. I have not
You're still
become a member
members,
anywhere
okay.
else. hmm
Okay.
We did officially join as members of LVLC when Alex joined me in Chicago, my husband. I was in
Mhm.
Chicago on and off from 2006 to 2009. Then we were in Santa Barbara, California for 4 years, and then we moved here.
Okay. Yeah. I forgot you were in California. And I also didn't
Mhm.
realize that you did your degree in lacrosse. I did a year in Stevens Point, so like right up the road from
Oh,
lacrosse.
yeah,
Yeah,
neighbors.
yeah, yeah, exactly. How was your experience at lacrosse for musical theater?
Yeah, Viterbo was, I mean, I met some of the closest friends in my entire life there. It was quite a
Mm,
learning experience coming from a really small town to a city that's built for college students. It's got three different schools there. But Viterbo
mm,
is a small school as well, but it was still much larger than the high school I'd gone to. Yeah, and being, a big fish in a little pond, and then being a fish with other fish in a regular size pond, and
right.
all the
Mm,
professional lessons learned. And I got to spend a semester away from school actually as an intern with the Commonweal Theater Company in Lanesboro, Minnesota as well. the first semester of my senior year, and that was a huge learning for me as well because I got to just live the life of a performing artist full time for
Mm,
that semester before I finished school. So I think that really helped prepare me for my jump to the real world and auditioning and making
yeah,
sure that that was
right,
even a
right.
schedule that would work for me, it's something I'd want to do.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, that's I was gonna say it's quite a jump from Iowa, I mean, the Midwest in general, because I guess you know, grew up in Iowa and then spent time in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and then then all of a sudden you're all the way in California and then all the way in New York. So, big
Mm.
uh, life experiences there. Can you talk a little bit about so Washington, Iowa? Correct. That's where you grew up.
Hmm.
Yeah. And can you talk just a little bit about your musical influences, inspirations, experiences growing up? Did you come from a pretty musical family?
I did indeed. My dad has his master's in vocal performance, and he was my junior high choir teacher and my sister's junior high choir teacher with my brother's high school
Mm,
teacher. He moved up to that eventually. So yes, I came from a very musical family. We did community theater shows. My dad ran a choral society called the Washington Choral Society for much of my life. I think the first show I ever did with them, I was like 4 or 5. Yeah, so
mm,
it's been very ingrained in me from a young age, this life. And my dad actually, before he and my mom got married, he lived in New York and was pursuing performing himself for like 9 months. So there was a little bit
mm.
of, finishing what my dad started energy for
Sure,
me, but
sure.
he gave me a wonderful foundation.
Yeah, definitely. I had no idea he was a teacher. Um,
Hmm.
that's pretty cool to have that early on. Um, did you did you always feel like music was the direction in which you wanted to go? Did it feel like it was something that was expected of you, or did you really have kind of free reign to explore what you wanted to explore, check out different things, and music just felt like the right thing, or was it something that you felt like, I gotta do this because this is what's in the family?
Yeah, it wasn't because it's in the family. It was because I just knew in my bones that that's what I was meant to do. I
Mm,
taught myself to use the VCR when I was 2 years old, and I used to watch The Sound of Music on repeat. And then when I was 8, I told my parents that I was going to be an actor. Like, I just announced it to them.
mhm,
So I've
mhm,
always had a very strong, like, inner compass, like, gut feeling that this is what I was meant to do. And I dabbled in lots of other extracurriculars simultaneously in high school, but this was always my main focus, and it was definitely
mhm.
supported by my family, given my dad's experience. And my mom played
Sure.
violin and
Mm,
sang too. She would definitely not say she's a singer, but she does have a lovely voice, and she taught kindergarten. So I
mm.
had lots of support in whatever I wanted to study.
Sure. Yeah, it definitely I was playing actually for I had a gig yesterday playing the piano for a high school. And I was just it's kind of crazy the community that music brings if you go into to music as a profession, just all the connections you see no matter which city you are, which city you're in, all the different connections that just kind of overlap, and I think it really just um, if you're growing up in a really musical family and having those connections with your dad being a teacher at your school, it
Mhm.
really enhances that experience and builds things for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it was
Yeah.
like a little, like, community web that already existed, and every time I've moved,
Mm,
when you said, like, you've been all over, you've been in California, you've been in New York, you've been in the Midwest, I
mhm,
because you have that shared language with musicians or artists, I feel like it's so much easier to find community because we kind of naturally do that. Like, when you do a show, it's
mhm.
so intimate so quickly, so it's kind of a special skill to be able to like find your people that fast and communicate in that way with such empathy and like emotional intelligence. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Um, What talk to me a little bit about so moving to Chicago for musical theater. Um,
Mhm.
what was that like when you first moved to Chicago? What were some of those experiences as they related to musical theater?
I was very fortunate. I booked a job within a couple weeks of moving for Imagination Theater, and it was a grant-funded program called Senior Spotlight. And I used to travel around to nursing homes and do a USO show for them, and I just loved it. It was so much fun. It felt so worthwhile and rewarding to be interacting with, this older generation and singing these songs they love so much and bringing them so much joy. And I did a couple other things while I was here. I did a production of Into the Woods that I really loved, and but it's really hard. It's really hard to
Mm,
be in a new city and to live the artist life and the auditioning. And when you're not in a show, it's really lonely um, and anxiety inducing. As a 22, 23-year old moving to Chicago, feeling like, oh, wow, I get it now. Like, this is what the real world is. This is what real life is. No one needs you. No one needs community in the same way that you do when you first move somewhere. Whereas in college, like everyone's there for the same purpose. And so we're all looking to make connections in the same way and find our people and find our friends. And so I found it really isolating at first. But as I booked shows,
mm,
I mean, I made some really close friends who I'm still friends with to today. Um, I went to go see a show actually on Broadway a week and a half ago with someone that I met in that production of Into the Woods in 2009. And now he lives out here too, and we still see each other a couple times a year. So yeah, I was overwhelmed and anxious and didn't know what I was doing, but still knew that I was doing the right thing, you know?
mm,
um,
mhm,
yeah, that's
mhm.
how I found Chicago at the beginning, but I really did love my time there. I was
Yeah.
sad to leave. We moved because Alex got into grad school at UC Santa Barbara, and so that's what took us out of
Mm,
Chicago.
that's
And
right.
I always intended on
Yeah.
coming back. Like I thought that after he
Mhm,
finished school, I moved back to Chicago, and then um, he was in school for 2 years, and he was really hating it, having a terrible time. So he quit school and got a job. And I had just started a theater company with my best friend out there,
mhm,
so I wasn't ready to leave Santa Barbara yet. So we ran our company for a couple years, and then I was doing a production of Avenue Q with another company out there, and the director looked at me one day after rehearsal and was like, "What are you doing here? Why aren't you in New York?" And I didn't really have an answer for him. And so then that put the little, bug in my ear about New York City. And I came out
mhm,
in February of 2013 for 11 days to do just the audition season for a little bit, and went to 8 different calls as a non-union member, got seen at 4 of them and got called back at one of them to the dance call. So I was like, oh, maybe I can do this. So that's how we
mhm.
made the transition. But
Yeah.
I was surprised that, Chicago wasn't where we came back to. That was always the plan.
Right, right. Yeah, that's, yeah, quite a story. I was just thinking while you were talking about being in Chicago, for the first time and looking for stuff and looking to get started as someone in your early 20s. And, again, at this gig that I was at yesterday, it was for, high school vocal students, and it was kind of a solo and ensemble thing where the students came and sang in front of a judge, and they got feedback and scores.
Hmm.
And so again, I was playing for the students, and um, the judge said to one of the students, who the student was planning on going into musical theater for school, and the judge said, get used to hearing no. And it's nothing personal, but just get used to hearing no over and over and over again. And I think it's
Hmm.
not just musical theater. You're going to hear that as a musician. I know you're going to hear no over and over and over again, and it's not personal, just the way it goes. And it's such a weird thing because so much of music is hearing no, but then there's so much of music that has, like I was saying earlier, that has this community that's unlike, I think, so many other professions where, and things are just crossing over, and these people know these people, and then you just get gigs and you get opportunities just kind of thrown your way
Mhm.
where you're not expecting them. But yeah, I can also relate to being kind of thrown into a new city and not really knowing anyone, having to kind of find your way, um,
Yeah.
and make that big transition. But it really is a difficult thing to jump into a new place and have your career be music and try to make ends meet. I can very much understand
Mhm.
get coming into a city like that and having to just find your way for sure.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard now. I mean, as a
Yeah.
person who has a partner and we have a life that is established and I'm raising a small child and um, even now the grind and the hustle of being an artist, it looks different
Mm,
than it did when I was 22 in Chicago and I'm really different and I know things now that I didn't know then obviously and I make different choices and audition for different things than I would have auditioned for then, but it doesn't necessarily make the constant rejection easier. I think you just, as you
mhm.
get older, I feel like I've started to understand and really take in that it is not personal, that it has nothing to do with me, in fact. It's nothing to do with my talent. It has to do with so many other factors that are not about me, which in a way can really
Yeah.
release you from any, self doubt, as much as you can. But
Right.
but it also
Sure.
kind of like takes you out of like it decenters yourself from the project in a way that I think is really good because if we're just like thinking about ourselves all the time, that's not a great way to live either.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. What are some of the projects that you're working on now, or that you're hoping to work on in the near future that you're excited about?
Yeah, I am really excited that Come From Away is going to be releasing their regional rights soon, I believe. That's a show that
Mhm.
I've had on my list for a long time that I've been working on the material for and like trying to position myself in the best place for the opportunity to be there.
Mhm.
I wrote a play last year, so we'll
Wow.
see what I do with that. But I finished the first draft, which is exciting.
Okay, so hold on.
Um,
Now you got to tell me
yeah.
tell me a little bit about the play before you keep going. You can't just
Oh
drop I
gosh.
wrote a play and
Be
then
like,
just keep
you wrote a
going.
play.
You got to tell me a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wrote a play. Oops. Um, I wrote a play about grief and what happens when we try to hold on to pieces of people after they've left us. It's
Mm,
about organ donation, and
mm,
it's about two different women who are navigating two separate losses and how it kind of brings them together, and also the way that they interact with their grief can also destroy their friendship at the same time. Um,
mm.
yeah, so that's all that
Wow.
I can say about it right now, but that's
So it's
some of the general
finished,
themes.
like, or you're still
It
touching
it
touching at it.
is oh, I will be touching it for a while. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the
Yeah.
first draft is
Okay.
done, and I've done a first round of rewrites, but what I need to do next, so I'm saying this somewhere that'll be published, so this will help me be held accountable.
Hmm.
I need to gather some friends that I
Hmm.
trust into a room and hear it out loud so I can get feedback and do some more rewrites, I think is my next step.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow. That's very exciting. A whole play.
Yeah, I know, hopefully. I think it's like
Yeah.
90 minutes too.
Yeah.
Like it's like a solid,
Wow.
you know,
What was the
90 minutes, no intermission.
Yeah. Yeah. Was that working on that, writing it, creating it? Was that, I mean, with any project, there are difficult parts and parts that are easier. did it did it feel like writing this play was just kind of not stream of consciousness necessarily, but did it feel like something that was just kind of coming out of you, or did it feel like something where you had to sit down and really kind of pound it out and really really work at it?
Both. Both.
Yeah,
There are
yeah,
some scenes
right, yeah, a
that really
combination.
just, yeah, just like fell out of my mouth, through my fingers.
Hmm.
And there are
Hmm.
other scenes that I've had to really think about and be intentional about, well, what actually is this moment for? And some of those scenes I cut when I did my first round of rewrites. I took
Hmm.
two different playwriting classes to get started because I've had this idea to write a play around this experience for like 6 years, but I didn't know how to get
Hmm.
started. I felt really, I don't know, a lot of imposter syndrome about whether or not I could even be a writer. Like, I didn't take any playwriting classes. I've never read anything. I don't understand dramatic structure. Well, yes, you do. You've been an actor the majority of your life, and you've been acting professionally for 20 years. So, yes, you do understand dramatic structure. And I took a virtual
Hmm.
class in January of last year with a woman who does playwriting classes specifically for actors who've never written before. So I did that, and that's how I got started. And then I took her like next level in August in an effort to force me to finish it, to hold myself accountable to something. So before class started in August, I finished the play and then used class time to hear the whole thing out loud in chunks and start my rewrites. Um, yeah. So sometimes it felt like work,
Yeah, very cool.
but the feeling like work part of it is mostly making yourself sit down and write. Because once I would get started, generally
Sure.
the characters would just come out.
Yeah, it's interesting that you. I guess it's not definitely not unheard of or anything. Probably happens more often than not, but just that you had this idea 6 years ago, and then it's really was not getting put on paper until several years later. There's I don't know if you know the name Rick Rubin.
Mhm.
Yeah. Do you know his book on the creative process?
I haven't read it, but I've heard it mentioned many a
Okay.
time and different pieces quoted,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's brilliant. I've read I think I've probably read like two-thirds of it, but he just it's so just brilliant the way he talks about, yeah, the creative process. And one of the things he talks about is just um the moment for any idea to kind of come forth, um just really depends. And sometimes the opportunity is not right. Sometimes the idea needs more time to grow before it can kind of come out into the world. But it really is just kind of um, amazing and special how just like how you were describing that, how you had this idea, and then sometimes that the idea just doesn't come to fruition until a little bit further down the road. And I find that kind of in my own music too, my own playing, is there's just sometimes where you feel inspiration and sometimes where you don't, but eventually it'll, if it's meant to be, then it'll come back around
Yep,
and make itself known. Yeah, very
totally,
cool.
totally.
Um,
Well, and the play that I wrote isn't the play that I
cool.
thought I was gonna write either, like the
Yeah,
ideas that I
that's the
had
other
about
thing.
what
Sure.
this would be, yeah, once I actually started writing
Right.
it, I the surrounding circumstances around the main idea completely changed, and I like
Mm,
them so much more than what I'd
yeah.
been envisioning before too.
Sure, sure. Yeah, that's one of the other things he talks about. Yeah, is that it'll sometimes be a completely different product than what you started with, and that's okay. You just kind of move where the spirit takes you, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to change directions just a little bit. Can you,
Let's
if
see.
you're up for it, tell me a little bit about your however you want to describe it, faith life, spiritual life, growing up, and then how those experiences were um, shaped, transformed, solidified through your experience at Lakeview?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in a Lutheran church as a kid, so very active parents. My parents were the Luther League, youth group leaders when I was little. And then by the time it was time for me to be there, we had someone else, Dean and Michelle Eaton, who were very influential in my experience at church. Just had a really, really great time as a kid at church, which I know is not everybody's story. So I feel very
Mhm.
grateful for that. And still struggled with a lot of anxiety and questions and doubts through college and just feeling like an inadequate Christian, I guess I would say. And when I moved to Chicago, I knew that I wanted to find a spiritual home. And the fact that Lakeview landed in my lap day one of my search is really part of a pattern of my life where I put an intention in the universe and then I kind of get beginner's luck with it, as some would say, or the universe is just like, no, here, like it points me very clearly to where I
Mm,
need to be. And that's how I
sure.
felt with Lakeview. The minute I got there, I didn't need or want to go anywhere else. In fact, after leaving Chicago, finding anything else that has compared has been quite difficult, actually.
Mm,
And I remember having
mhm,
a discussion
mhm,
with Lila once. Oh my gosh, one of the times that I was, through the city on one of my tours, I think. And I said something to her about, feeling like really bad that I hadn't found a church community where I was and that I was looking so hard. And she was just like, well, Emily, maybe that's not what you need anymore. Like maybe that space
mm,
you had at Lakeview and maybe wherever you are on your spiritual journey right now, you don't need that because you already found that and you need something else. Maybe it's time for like a more personal relationship. And that was really helpful to me and it helped release a lot of expectation I think that I was putting on myself. She and I have had a conversation since about, what church has always looked like and is that what it's going to look like in the future? Um, yeah, so I feel like I'm now on, I don't know, a similar journey that I was then. I'm not searching for another place to call, my spiritual home like Lakeview. It will always be Lakeview for me. And I'm very happy to say that.
mhm,
I have a church gig. I sing at an Episcopalian church up here in the Bronx on Sundays.
mm,
And it's a wonderful community of humans. And I'm so like happy to have that job and be around them. And so it's nice that my Sundays are filled with worship and in a place that feels good to be at. But again, I still feel like a lot of it is rooted in my own relationship with God and my own conversations and questions and prayers. And when I think of the place that I would want to be worshiping again, it would always be Lakeview, which is why the concert was so
mm,
special. And that weekend being there for the last Sunday
sure.
before, the
Yeah,
doors closed,
yeah,
it felt
yeah.
really like momentous to be a part of it.
Mm, yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, it's it's something because it's, as we get deeper into the 2020s, and you just hear more and more about fewer and fewer people going to church, and the church as an institution just declining in, I don't know if I would say declining in relevancy, but just not having the same influence, but people still needing sort of a home in a lot of ways, or a place to find community. And I think it's it's hard to find those places outside of the church. And during
Yeah,
when I
sometimes.
was in Atlanta, yeah, yeah, but I was a staff singer for several different churches while I was in Atlanta, and it took, I think it was really just the last year that I was there that I actually found a church that where their beliefs and their kind of their community matched up with what I was looking for spiritually. And the other churches that I had sung at before that were the churches were fine. They didn't necessarily line up with my personal beliefs, but it's sort of a strange thing to be in a place where you're participating in one way, but not participating in a bunch of other ways. And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, like you were saying about Lakeview, it kind of that's one place where things kind of line up. And I do think that was really special last year, having those events and seeing all these things kind of line up uh, with all these people over the years who called Lakeview their home.
Hmm. I agree. I agree. And I also think that as we, like you said, as we moved into whatever this new version of life and church is in the 2020s and pretty soon the 2030s, barf.
Mm,
But
right.
I do think that life looks different than it used to. We have access to connection with other human beings in such a different way than people did when churches were first being formed, when I think that they were like at the
Mm,
height of their attendance. I mean, I saw something a couple months ago that like 33% of people in the country now identify as agnostic, right? Like they don't go to a church, they don't,
mm,
and that's such a high statistic in comparison to the way the country used to be. But I also think it speaks to the kinds of conversations that we're having in our personal communities too. Like I feel like I've had some of the deepest like theological discussions with just my friends because
mm,
we're talking about feelings, we're talking about things that scare us, we're talking about what happens when we die, like conversations that
right.
I don't know if people were that intimate with their friend groups in that way before. Do you know what I mean? Maybe they were, but
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I think we have therapy now. We talk about our feelings, we do those things that I
Right.
think
Right.
kind of
Right.
promotes those kind of conversations in different spaces than they were in before.
Mm. Yeah, I think you're right in a lot of ways. I mean, for me, I do have a lot of really deep uh, conversations with close friends and family members, um, and that I wouldn't necessarily have with people in a church. I do get I've seen several articles over the year that just talk about how especially in America, how lonely people are and how um, m- there are this huge percentage of people who don't have anyone, who don't feel like they have
Yeah.
um, even one or two close personal friends. So I think it's just something that again, like what I was just saying, is you see that decline in this big institution that has been a part of our country for so long, and it's like
Hmm.
how do we find each other out of those out of that institution. um,
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good question. And that's a really good point. I mean, I think, well, I have lots of thoughts, but I was going to say, like, like creating opportunities for community, um, especially after living through the pandemic that we're honestly still living through, right? We're experiencing the
right.
second highest surge of COVID
Hmm. Right.
right now,
Yep.
which is wild. But, you know, figuring out how to be physically together again and what those spaces can look
Mm,
like and what those spaces should look like if they're actually inclusive to all people. And
right.
we're not, keeping some people out. I think that there's a lot of change that needs to happen to the majority of like Christian institutions in this country for that reason. But it's also one of the
For
reasons that I
sure.
felt so drawn to Lakeview in the first place because it felt like a place like that. Like it has always been a place that I felt like anyone could come to and feel at home, um, which
Yeah.
is what I believe Jesus was saying.
Right. Oh, for sure. Yeah. And yeah, I do think that's a big part of it. Why people don't go to church anymore? It's because they're not feeling welcomed and they're not feeling at home. They're not feeling like they have spaces where they can just be themselves. And I think you're absolutely right. Lakeview is one of those places um, where people feel like they can do that, even if it's not the big congregation or the relatively big congregation that it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, there's lots we could keep exploring these questions for many episodes. So
I'm sure you will.
we'll have to
I'm
circle
sure
back
that
at
you
some
will.
point. Yeah, yeah. Anyways, right, we'll wrap up here. I'll let you have a minute so you can go pick up your daughter from school. But
Thank
thank you so
you.
much for being here. It's lovely to see you. I'm glad we figured out a medium where we could talk from several hundred miles away and have such a great conversation. I hope to
Yeah.
see you in person sometime soon. Hope you can make it back to Chicago and even if it's just for a few days. But thank you for being here and talking with me.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Zachariah. And of course, if when, I mean, it won't be if, whenever we do get back to Chicago for a visit, LVLC will know. We'll be there. We'll find y'all wherever you
For
are.
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks very much. Take care.